regarding the death of Tommie Mcglothen. We've been investigating it. And this morning, your department sent out a news release and saying that Tommie Mcglothen Jr. died from excited delirium. Can you explain what that is?
Well, Dominique, excited delirium is a syndrome that happens occasionally. It's been well documented for a long period of time, and it happens in people that have previous histories of mental illness or on neuroleptics, or sometimes people when they're under the influence of drugs. And it's a medical emergency. It's a medical condition. It's not just a mental condition. And what happens is it's characterized by combative behavior, violent behavior, confusion, disorientation. It can be associated with high temperatures and fever. People have a tendency to become extremely violent. When we first started having issues with excited delirium was one of those times when people were thinking that we were having taser deaths while people were in police custody, because people would be exhibiting a very strong violent behavior, and it would take a lot of people to restrain those people. And when they did, they'd tase them, and then they'd become unresponsive and die in police custody. A lot of times they thought that was related to the tasers. All of the studies have shown that it's not related to the tasers. It's a system of hyperexcitability, hyper metabolism, elevated heart rate, elevated breathing patterns, etc. And if it's not treated, people have a tendency to have sudden cardiac death and die from this disease.
It's a little confusing though in the news release where it says he passed away from excited delirium. However, the death possibly could have been prevented. Can you go into detail on that? Because we understand that Mr. Mcglothen did not receive any type of medical assistance for 45 minutes.
Well, that's what was listed in the press release. I frequently review cases to find out whether cases are preventable, possibly preventable, or not preventable. And in this situation, the police were faced with a man who'd had a break like that, had a run-in earlier in the day with another citizen, and a run-in later on with a citizen that night on Eileen Street. When confronted, he was showing and exhibiting all the symptoms of excited delirium: confused, disoriented, violent, uncontrollable. That's a medical problem. So what happened was they used extreme measures to restrain him and get him under control. When they did, they placed him into the back of a patrol car rather than sending him to the hospital for evaluation or calling the fire department to come evaluate. The fact that he was placed in that police car and stayed there for 48 minutes before he was discovered to be unresponsive was time that he should have been receiving medical care. And as you probably know, and we've worked together before, I work at Ochsner LSU in the emergency department. I don't know that I've ever had anybody die from excited delirium that's been brought into the hospital. If they make it to the hospital, they probably will survive. It's a treatable problem. In this situation, I think it was a failure to recognize.
So are you saying, Dr. Tommie, first of all, did you view the video that we showed on KSLA News 12 yesterday?
I did. Now, I did not have that video beforehand.
Okay.
The video that I've hours and hours of video is from police dash cams, police videos, etc. So I did not have that dash cam.
So the video that we showed on air yesterday, would that change your findings?
No. And let me tell you why. A complete autopsy was done. And he showed a lot of soft tissue contusions. He had a lot of bruising associated with it. He had subgaleal hemorrhages where he'd been hit in the head. He had been tased, but there was no internal bleeding. There was no internal injuries. There was no internal organ damage. There was no broken ribs. There was nothing from the violence that would have killed him. Now, that doesn't mean the violence was okay. I'm not justifying that. I'm just saying it wasn't the violent attack or the amount of force used to restrain him that actually led to his death.
But Dr. Tommie, it's hard to believe that the amount of blows that this man received to his legs, to his head, the tasing, it's hard to believe that debt didn't contribute to the excited delirium. Why would that not contribute? I know there was a lot of bruising and everything, but would that contribute to a heart attack?
The excited delirium is already a maximally excitable state. I mean, their heart rates are very high, their respiratory rates are very high, their adrenaline is flowing. It's already a maximal state. That's the reason it's so hard to have somebody under control. Now, I'm not going to say it helped. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it would. I think it would have happened either way, whether the violence was there or not, because he was already violent. I mean, he had already been physically attacked by two different citizens that he approached to. So they weren't the only ones that hit him. People like this are extremely hard to control. I'm not going to make a judgment now or ever about police policies and procedures, excessive force, whether this man's civil liberties have been violated. That's up to the DA and the police department, and that investigation is ongoing. My investigation is strictly the cause and manner of death.
Okay. Speaking of, I guess, working with the DA or the Shreveport Police Department, is there at any way that you work together with the police department to come up with these findings? Is there a report that they do that they pass along to you?
The reason that it took me so long to get the report done, just so you'll know what goes into my evaluation, we did the initial evaluation with the death investigators, the time of and day that it happened. We did the autopsy, and the autopsy usually will take 4 or 5 weeks to get final autopsy results back. So I had to get the final autopsy results back with the toxicology. Once that came back, then I had several hours of police video. I had several police reports that I had to evaluate. I had to get old medical records on Mr. Mcglothen. I had to get the medical records for Willis Knighton when he died. I had to review all of these things, make notes, and then put out a full report of what I found. Because the autopsy itself, all it showed was some underlying undiagnosed heart disease and a bunch of bruises and scrapes. That's it. But when you go back and you look at the whole thing in context and you look at the video, you know what happened to him. You know the violent behavior. You know what was going on with him. I got to look at 48 minutes of him sitting in the back of a police car, breathing several times a minute, trying to breathe, etc., where he was in obvious extremis. It was clear to me what was going on with him, and he needed medical care. So after me reviewing all of that information, making notes on everything, and making a complete report that I've reviewed all of those things, I released that report today to the police department and the DA's office and sent out a press release.
Okay. I don't know if I have anything else. I think you covered everything, the process. I think you covered what excited delirium is. So are you—
Dan, that this is just one part of the puzzle. This is not designed for this investigation to end. This investigation is not over. What is over is my part of it. What's the medical reason that this happened? Why did he die? And I found that there were some issues with this. There were some problems with this. Now it's in the hands of the DA and the police department to determine whether or not the rest of those things are appropriate or not appropriate. But I did my part to find out the time, manner, and cause of death.
What did the toxicology results show?
That's part of the final autopsy report. I will tell you that they were not that shocking. He did not have any truly illicit drugs. There was a presence of marijuana, and that's all. There were no stimulants or cocaine or methamphetamine associated with it. So the toxicology results were not that helpful.
My last question, would he still be alive today if he weren't fighting with the police?
I can't answer that 100%, but I will tell you, like I said before, that people that get medical care, the longer you wait to give them medical care, the higher the mortality is going to be. If they make it to the hospital, they usually survive.
So you're saying that you can die from excited delirium without any of the brutal or fighting?
Oh, yeah. Oh, happens all the time. Happens all the time. Even before they get put in handcuffs sometimes, just when they're in the heightened state, and causing a disturbance, they may just collapse and die. And we had a case of that several years ago that happened here before any of the restraint part of it came down. So it is possible and it does happen.
Is there any recommendation, since you examine a lot of people, you know, once they die, and you've talked about excited delirium, and a lot of times, is there any recommendation that you have for people who approach people with mental illness, perhaps the police?
You need to understand that the state of excited delirium is not just a state of mental illness. Sometimes people with mental illness can respond, answer questions appropriately, can be talked down, can be settled down. They can answer questions appropriately. In a situation like this, there's none of that. And one of the problems that we have is not recognition of this. I have to, when I'm in the emergency department and I'm faced with someone violent like that, I have to keep reminding myself this is a mental condition. It's not a psychiatric medical condition, not a mental condition. It's not a psychiatric issue. It's a medical issue. And these people don't have control over that. That's hard to do when someone's kicking and biting and fighting and screaming and etc., but they're not in their right mind.
Let me ask you one last question. It just came up, and this is about Wavy Austin, another man that died in police custody. Again, it was excited delirium.
That death report has not been signed yet.
So you can't say if it was excited delirium
at this point in time. I'm still in the midst of the investigation on that. I have autopsy results back. I've not signed the death certificate, and I still have. I'm doing interviews. There was no police camera video on that case. There are actual interviews that I'm having to review and medical records, but that report hasn't been written yet.
Okay, and I should correct myself and say we were told that it's excited delirium. I don't want to be the spokesperson.
I can tell you that my working diagnosis is that, but it can always change before the final report comes out.
Okay. What was his situation? Oh, you haven't released the autopsy results on that.
I'm not going to talk about that case until the report's been released.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Tommie?
No, this was a tragic case. Very, very sorry for the family.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.